is Representative, your takeaway from your meeting with the vice president?
Well, I mean, I thought it was apparent that the vice president and the administration is not only focused on a federal solution to voting rights, but they're also closely tracking what is happening at a state level.
Yep. Governor Greg Abbott just vetoed funding for the Texas state legislature just days after you and your colleagues staged a walkout to defeat Abbott's elections bill. Your sense of how this is going to impact your ability to govern?
I mean, well, it's unfortunate that the governor chose that option as a form of punishment. And I'm hoping that constitutional scholars are looking at what's happened here in Texas, because for many of us, this seems unconstitutional for the executive branch to take such a drastic action against an entire branch of government.
We're going to be talking with Beto O'Rourke about fighting back on the federal level, though. I wonder, from your vantage point, how are Texans going to fight back?
I mean, we're still going to have to use every tool in our toolbox. I mean, we were out in D.C. We were hoping to, I think there was progress made when we were in D.C. and talking to several legislators. And I'm hoping that, we can still move forward with that option, because there aren't very many options here in Texas, as we've seen what happened this last session.
Right. Can you just underscore that for me? Because we talk a lot about federal legislation that would protect the right to vote. But I think that Texas is really bringing this question into focus right now. Talk to me a little bit about how you feel your options are limited and how that then creates additional importance of federal action.
Well, I mean, the same way that there is, Manchin tried to have a bipartisan bill. And while, we appreciate that and we respect that, that is not the case here in Texas either. Hence why we had to use the nuclear option and break quorum, is because Democrats were left out of the conversation. Democrat amendments were stripped out of the bill. Provisions were added at the 11th hour. And so we were just completely cut out of the conversation. And that's going to continue. This is a priority for the governor. We know that we're going to get called back for a special session. And if this is going to be the same that happened during session and we're going to be left out of the conversation, they're just going to shove legislation through that is going to hurt Texans. I
just want to put this into context, because this is not the only thing happening right now in Texas. In fact, Texans are being asked by ERCOT, the power grid operator, to conserve energy. It comes, obviously, no surprise to our viewers, 4 months after a massive power outage left millions without heat, without electricity, in sub-freezing temperatures. What does this say to you, Representative, about the priorities or lack thereof of state leaders, that they're spending all of this time restricting Texans' right to vote when there are big structural, immediate problems that are not being addressed?
Well, I mean, clearly there were several big issues that we didn't address during session, just as addressing the real, people that are still being hurt by the global pandemic, which we're still in, and also just with our grid, and now we're hearing the governor focusing on building a border wall. And I wish the governor would focus on ensuring the stability of our electric grid, which clearly was not addressed during session, because ERCOT was asking folks to conserve energy at the beginning of summer, which is already really hot here. And so instead of defunding our police and our criminal justice system, these resources should be used to make sure that no more people die, because I believe there was about 700 people that died during that time. And instead of focusing on these other divisive issues, we should really be focused on what's going to help the people of Texas, because that's what we were saying. That's what our job is in the Capitol.
Another Texas Democrat working overtime to protect voting rights in his state and beyond, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. He has spent the past month on the road visiting around 20 cities to raise awareness and put pressure on Congress to take action to protect voting rights. That tour coming to an end tomorrow with a large rally in front of the state capitol in Austin. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, founder of Power to the People, joins me now. Congressman, I love that you were in a car as to underscore the fact that you are traveling through the great state of Texas. Before we get to your road tour, I want to talk about Senator Manchin's compromise bill on voting rights. There are several outlets, including Politico, reporting that you back it. I want to give you a chance to express whether or not that is true. What about it you like? What about it you want to see changed?
Yeah, I think Manchin is moving in the right direction, and I'm grateful that he's at least back at the table and talking with his colleagues. I don't know that this goes far enough. It doesn't address the way that we finance campaigns. The original For the People Act allowed citizen funding of campaigns to try to diminish the power of corporate spending and big donor dollars in our system. I'd also like to see automatic voter registration and same-day voter registration so we can get more eligible voters on the rolls, participating in our elections and having a say in who's going to represent them. But again, I'm glad he's talking with his colleagues. I hope that's a sign of progress. And I'd love for him and really the Democrats in the Senate to see if they can't go further and get something closer to the House version of the For the People Act. Well,
you have been all over your state. Tomorrow is your final rally in Austin. What have you heard from Texans?
Well, I'm in Crockett, Texas right now in Houston County, having left Marshall and Nacogdoches in East Texas earlier today. Doesn't matter where I go. People are concerned that in a state that is already the toughest in which to vote, they're going to try to make it even harder with a voter suppression bill that would end Sunday morning voting or souls to the polls, would allow partisan poll watchers free reign in polling places, would make it harder for those with a disability to cast a ballot. And most alarmingly, Alicia, Texas would reserve the right to overturn future elections simply based on the allegation of fraud. When you have that, you no longer have a democracy. And I was listening to State Representative Jessica Gonzalez in your interview with her earlier. She has it absolutely right. They have done, she and her colleagues have done as much as they can here in Texas. We now need federal help, and that has to come in the form of the For the People Act. And the first votes will be taken out on that this Tuesday in the Senate. So that's part of why we're gathering in Austin tomorrow at the Capitol at 5:30. We want to rally so those senators and the president hear us loud and clear. We need their help if we're going to be able to preserve the right to vote in Texas and throughout the country.
The New York Times reports today on how Republican states continue to expand their powers over elections. This isn't just happening in Texas, as you know. So you have Republicans removing Democrats of color from local boards in Georgia, stripping election control from county authorities in Arkansas. That was all so shocking that I had to go back and read the article twice to make sure that I was getting it right. I mean, when you talk about organizing people inside of the state, what does that have to look like? What is the pressure point? Where is the tipping point where all of a sudden Congress really starts to listen and understand?
You know, when people get out there and stand up to be counted and speak out, their representatives, Republicans and Democrats alike, listen. I mean, I think that's part of what motivated those state House Democratic legislators to walk out at the 11th hour and to stop that voter suppression bill. They knew that the people were behind them. But by that same token, I now see Republican lawmakers in Texas backpedaling from provisions within the elections bill here because it is so damn unpopular in this state. And they're hearing from their constituents. It's that kind of people power that I think will move the U.S. Senate, will move the president to make it his priority. It's what moved President Johnson to introduce the 1965 Voting Rights Act and for those members of the Congress at the time to vote for it. It wasn't popular in states like Texas or Mississippi or Georgia, but when you have John Lewis crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in March of 1965, literally willing to lose his life for democracy, it shocked and it engaged the conscience of the country. And that's what we need right now. We're not asking anyone to risk or lose their lives, but we are asking people to get out there and to show up and to come rally with us at the state capitol in Austin tomorrow and to do so in their own states. That kind of pressure is what it's going to take. Black Voters Matter, for example, are doing freedom rides. They're going to culminate in an action in Washington, D.C. I love that because it's an echo of the civil rights and voting rights leadership of the 1950s and 60s that produced the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. So let's remember what got us here as we celebrate Juneteenth and think about those who struggled and sacrificed before us so that we could have this very democracy and then make sure that we're doing our part.